smell terrible.
Hello and welcome to another UKGN Network podcast. I'm Zoidberg. This week we've borne witness to yet another cautionary tale about the dangers of an always online future. The name of this tale was Battleborn. It was announced this week that Gearbox's game is being removed from all online stores, and that servers will be switched off for good in January 2020. First released in May 2016, this was an enjoyable co-op shooter, where you and 3 friends could fight your way through a campaign together. What made it different was the selection of characters, who all had distinct and varied abilities that meant anyone could find their ideal way to play. Even if you didn't want to play co-op, you could select the private match option and play solo, which made the game more difficult, but crucially it was still fun. It's a shame then that even though solo play is possible, the game will be completely unplayable in just over a year's time. When analysing why the game failed to find an audience, there are 3 main factors that contributed to its downfall. Many point to Overwatch as the primary reason, but in truth this is only a very small part of the story. The 2 decisions made by 2K's marketing department were much more instrumental. All the pre-release press concentrated on the competitive MOBA-like multiplayer, which was by far the least interesting and worst element of the game. Instead, they should have concentrated on how similar to Borderlands the campaign was. Considering that it came from the same developer, that decision was just baffling. Then there was the release date, 3 weeks before Blizzard's long-awaited entry into the competitive shooter market. There was simply no way that any other shooter stood a chance in the same month as that. We're now left with the very real fact that, even if you bought the game, you won't be able to play it anymore once the switch off occurs. Hopefully there's time for somebody to patch in offline play or the ability to create private servers before this happens, but we wouldn't hold our breath. This isn't the first time a developer's hard work has been undone by poor decisions made at the marketing stage. Here are 5 other notable examples. Blur, 2010. With full price releases costing £50 a piece, there are a lot of people out there who can't afford to buy more than one a month. Fans of arcade racing games would have found themselves torn in May 2010, with the releases of Blur and Split Second being separated by just a week. The latter was a destruction-fueled adrenaline rush developed by BlackRock Studio, whereas Blur was promoted as Mario Kart with real-world cars, and came from the makers of Project Gotham Racing. By releasing them both at the same time, the sales would have been divided between the 2 of them. The tragedy of that is, of course, that both didn't sell well enough for their publishers, and the studios were closed down as a result. Surely this could have been avoided if just one of the games had been delayed by a month or 2. Singularity, 2010. Even during the month of its release, you could have been forgiven for not knowing that Singularity existed, as we never saw any adverts in magazines, on websites or on TV. You would have thought that a new IP from Raven Software, the developers of Return to Castle Wolfenstein and Jedi Knight 2, would have been something that Activision would want us to get excited about, yet it hit the shelves with a deafening silence. The publisher mistakenly chose to put all their effort into promoting Transformers War for Cybertron instead. This remains one of the best FPS games ever released on the Xbox 360, with gameplay that brought back memories of Half-Life 2 and a sense of location similar to Bioshock. Raven have sadly been relegated to making zombies for Call of Duty games ever since. Titanfall 2, 2016. With one of the best single-player campaigns around and fantastic multiplayer, you would think that Titanfall 2 was one of the biggest success stories of the current console generation. For some reason though, EA thought a good release date for it was 1 week after Battlefield 1 and a week before Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. With the installed fanbase that both of these franchises have, it didn't matter that Titanfall 2 was by far the better game of the 3. It didn't stand a chance of selling, despite topping many people's lists of the games of the year. The good news is that it can be picked up today for less than £5, or even as part of this month's PlayStation Plus lineup. But the bad news is that Titanfall 3 may never happen as a result. The success of Apex Legends, set within the same universe, means there's a small glimmer of hope for the future though. Lawbreakers, 2017. When releasing an online shooter with features that many players will not have seen before, getting people to actually play the game is the first hurdle, and this is where Lawbreakers failed. Gamers were simply unwilling to shell out the £25 asking price for an unknown quantity, when titles like Fortnite Battle Royale and Warframe were free to play. It's a real shame, as anyone who did play it will have discovered a game unmistakably from the same mind as Unreal Tournament, with a unique anti-gravity hook and a fantastic selection of maps. The player numbers dropped steadily after release, right up until publisher Nexon pulled the plug in September 2018. If this had been free to play itself, the story could have been so much different. Crackdown 3, 2019. Crackdown 3 is genuinely one of the most enjoyable games released in the last 12 months, and it succeeded where Crackdown 2 failed in delivering exactly what fans of the original game wanted. Sumo Digital did a terrific job of creating a playground we could jump around and explore in any way we saw fit, and gathering the agility orbs quickly became just as addictive as you'd hope. Unfortunately, the development dragged on well past its original release date, creating lots of negative press, and a level of destruction was promised by Microsoft that simply wasn't delivered. Worst of all though, all the pre-release hype focused on the terrible multiplayer mode that nobody wanted or asked for. Review scores were low and sales figures were terrible, but this was mainly down to it being the first full price release to arrive day one on Xbox Game Pass. Now it's time to see what new games we've been playing this week with our reviews. Let's not beat about the bush. The release of Google Stadia has been a disaster, but the one beacon of hope in the forgettable game lineup is Tequila Works' excellent atmospheric horror, Gylt. Don't let the cutesy cartoonish look fool you. This is a game that creeped me out on many occasions, thanks to its disturbing creature design and the dark foreboding corridors of the school you're exploring. It's the first genuine survival horror game I've played in a long time, which works because the central character always feels vulnerable and underpowered. It should take roughly 6 to 7 hours to complete, but with an environment this rich with detail, you'll want to stop and look around, so it could take even longer. While it's an undeniably good game, it's definitely not worth the investment required to play it. The £30 price tag itself is pretty high, but having to shell out an additional $120 for Stadia just to be able to play it is not something we can recommend right now. After a couple of weeks, we finally got hold of the latest Pokemon game for the Nintendo Switch, and the wait was definitely worth it. We'd not played a mainline game in the series for a long time, but Pokemon Sword sucked us back in with ease with its back-to-basics approach. The battles rely on a rock-paper-scissors style, requiring you to know what elements work well against others. XP is now shared across your entire team, meaning that Pokemon can level up without forcing you to use them in battles, and this allows you to take more of a risk with the types of Pokemon you use. There are occasional visual glitches, such as characters appearing out of nowhere, but it never affects your enjoyment of the game, and the Pokemon themselves are as adorable as ever. It's just a pity that the Sword Edition doesn't feature the rainbow-coloured unicorn, meaning we'll probably have to go out and buy the Shield Edition as well. Arise, A Simple Story is a new indie platformer set entirely in the afterlife, where you play through levels that represent the significant moments from your character's life. The right joystick controls time, allowing you to fast forward, rewind and pause your surroundings, and this is used to create new routes through the levels. When a game relies so heavily on precise platforming, you expect the controls to be much more responsive than they are here. It shouldn't be as difficult as it is to perform a simple jump, but all too often we fell off to our death because the game hadn't registered a button press, or simply misjudged where the rock we were trying to land on actually was. A more pronounced shadow underneath your character would have worked wonders. It's a shame, as the presentation is good and it can be enjoyable when it works properly. There's a whole subgenre of simulation games about running a factory. Big Pharma was one of the first, coming out on the PC way back in 2015, and now it's arrived on consoles. By today's standards it's a little basic, especially in the visual department, with gameplay that has been easily surpassed by the likes of Automa Chef and Satisfactory. It doesn't help that the tutorial isn't clear enough to ease you in. There's a lot of text to read through, and on more than one occasion what we were being told to look for was called something entirely different in the menus. Also, the change from mouse control to a joypad hasn't been well thought out. We found it to be a mostly frustrating experience, one for the hardcore fans only. With that, we'll call time on this week's show, and end in the usual way with our retro game of the week. December the 3rd marked 25 years since the first PlayStation console launched in Japan, with a selection of games that included a stunning home version of Namco's Ridge Racer. I was lucky enough to sample a PlayStation console on import, and as a massive fan of the original game, this was the first disc I loaded up. I was transported instantly back to the arcade with an almost perfect conversion, and spent the majority of the weekend playing nothing else. It completely banished the memories of terrible home versions of the likes of Outrun and Chase HQ on the Amiga. If this was what the future of gaming looked like, I was sold. When the console arrived in the UK, I bought it almost instantly, along with Wipeout and Worms, and never looked back. Even though it has appeared on other systems, the Ridge Racer series is synonymous with the PlayStation, and to date the PS4 is the only model to launch without a new game in the lineup. My biggest wish for the PS5 is that the tradition is continued. Please, Namco? We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please let us know in the comments about your memories of the PlayStation and any games that you think were let down by their marketing. We'll be back next week with another show just like this one, including reviews of Phoenix Point and Darksiders Genesis. Why not check out our playlist at any episodes of the podcast that you might have missed, and then give us a like and subscribe to be notified of the new episodes as they're released. You can also follow us on all social media at UKGN Network. Until next week, thanks for listening, see you soon.